Well, greetings, everyone. My name is Dr. Jimeno with University Professors Press. I'm very pleased to have as our guests today William Jimeno and Michael Moats to discuss their new book, Sunrise Through the Darkness, a survivor's account of learning to live again beyond 9/11. This book recounts William's journey as a New York Port Authority police officer responding to the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center in 2001. Becoming buried under the rubble of both towers after they collapsed, his rescue, his physical recovery, and longer psychological recovery, and his unselfish devotion to his fellow first responders, many of whom gave their lives in responding to the disaster. William uses his personal experiences to launch into discussion of how others experiencing their own personal trauma may benefit from his story. Further, Dr. Moats provides his professional insight into PTSD, whether experienced directly or vicariously, as in the case of William's wife, Allison. Though this book holds intriguing stories and practical tips for the general public, it has special meaning to me as I work with law enforcement and their families, as well as military members on a daily basis. These professions hold similar ideas when it comes to responding to potentially traumatic events on a routine basis and seeking therapy when called for. So welcome, William. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks,
In your
Jim.
book,
Thanks for having us.
I didn't find that you expressly stated. In your book, I didn't see that you expressly stated how the two of you came together to collaborate on this project. So can you just tell us how you got together on this project?
Well, Mike, I'll tell them real quick. I've been trying to put this book together probably for the last 8 to 10 years. I was having trouble getting it done. You know, a lot of the publishers said, look, we love your story. They made a film about you guys called World Trade Center by Oliver Stone. And during my speaking engagements since 2003, I've been able to meet thousands of people. And they always come up after my speaking engagements to tell me how what I shared with them gave them a lot of hope, a lot of inspiration. And I realized that as a survivor, my obligation has always been to help other people, continue to help other people, and let people know that whatever tragedies they go through, they can also overcome them. So it was last year, I had shoulder surgery in January of 2020. I was just recovering from that. And I sat there and I was kind of like bummed out, like, okay, I'm not going to have a book for the 20th anniversary. And then that's when I thought about Michael. You know, I know Michael now for a very long time. Known him since probably 2004 or 5. And I knew he had written books. I knew he was associated with UPP. So I called him while I was recovering and said, hey, Mike, would you help me write this book? I can talk. I'm not a good writer. I knew he could write. And he said, Mike, if we collaborate on this, what I thought of was I tell my story and the message that I want to give, and that is overcoming the darkness, overcoming post-traumatic stress disorder or whatever struggles someone might have. But at the same time, I'm able to help people because I'm telling my story, but now with the help of Michael and his expertise, I thought, hey, can you sprinkle that information in there for fellow Americans, fellow human beings who are struggling with any type of darkness, but either refuse to go to talk to someone, are too afraid to go to talk to someone, or might be ashamed, or just feel like, hey, going to talk to someone is not going to help me. And because I've had so many people that I know actually lose their lives to suicide, live a terrible life because they don't go talk to somebody. And I want people to be able to understand that, I'm no different than them. I want them to understand that if I can overcome my struggles and I can reach my happiness, so can they. But again, I can only give one perspective. I think it's important to have someone with a clinical background like Michael does that is able to give that information as they read the book. And that's how we came together. Mike said, yeah, let's do this. We got together with Lewis Hoffman from UPP. We talked about it. They stepped out of their wheelhouse, which I really appreciate UPP doing, because this book's really going to help people. But that's how we came to get together with the book. But again, I've known Michael Moats probably a good, over 15 years and love him to death.
Yeah, it was one of those things that when Will talked about it, obviously I knew Will's story from especially the beginning part of it. but the more we talked about what he was hoping to see, I definitely bought into and agree with in the approach, in that it's not something you're just trying to get over, get rid of, remove. It's not a pathology. It's a very historic event in not only U.S. but world history. Um, but the impact of that time was so meaningful, in spite of the darkness that was going on. And so then Will said, here, I want to be able to talk about these things because we have a lot of folks who are dying, and stats show it, especially in our first responder families. We have a high percentage of people dying, and needlessly. And so we wanted to really create a book of not just here's a story, but here's the story, here's the meaning behind it, here's the to broaden it into encompassing like Will's wife Allison, to give her perspective as well, because it's, especially in practice, that's one of the populations I see that gets missed a lot, is the family members, the friends, the people who are closest to those who are suffering and struggling with PTSD. And so we wanted to give that voice because we knew that through her experience, she also could reach some other people. Even say first responders, they might hear a spouse outside of their family and they might hear it in a different way. And that's really what we're trying to do, is we're trying to just knock on the doors in many ways possible, to reach out to those who have been serving us their whole lives. And we want to try to reach back to them.
Well, you've taken an interesting approach to telling the story by asking people to be more than just mere readers of the book. You want them to be a participant in the experience in each chapter, in activities at the end of the book, to reflect upon their own thoughts and emotions. How did you decide upon that format to explain the journey of recovery?
Well, even though Will and I bounce back and forth on these questions, we were constantly in dialogue about, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? But for me, it's what I do in practice every day. It's literally just helping people, just asking questions to have people look at things from different perspectives, because we really have so much more power and answers in our own lives. And often as a psychologist, all I'm really doing is helping them to look at things from a different perspective, because especially after trauma, we can get such a narrowed perspective if we just say, hey, what are you thinking about this? What are you feeling about this? Did you notice something in your body? Because again, with trauma, there's often almost a disconnect between the mind and the body after experiences. So it was really an opportunity rather than dictating to anyone, that if you'd like to take this as an extra journey, do a little bit of exploration there. See what comes up for you. See if you're noticing things a little differently, because we all as humans get in our ruts and protect defensively, and our pains. And so the idea was to hopefully open a few extra doors to just let people walk with us, or vice versa, let us walk with them, rather than to just, again, be detached from something and simply be an observer. We wanted it to be a shared experience.
And I think what's important there is what I asked Michael to do was, hey, Mike, when I didn't want to talk to someone, and I'm talking as a first responder, I didn't even know I was suffering from PTSD, any type of mental struggle. I didn't want to talk to anybody. And a lot of people I've met, especially first responders, they're like, man, I just don't want to talk to anybody. I'll go and talk to a therapist or whoever, and they don't understand me. And that turns us off. And I said to Mike, I said, what I would like to see from you, and this is in your book court, is don't make it that medical mumbo jumbo that I think I'm talking for me personally as first responder, that turns us off. We got enough stresses in our life, whether it's physical, mental struggles, just the beat down of the job day to day. You want to be able to feel like you're talking to someone that you're comfortable with. And sometimes that takes a long time to reach. It took a long time for me to reach that person that I feel comfortable with, that I felt made a breakthrough for me. And what we're trying to do with this book is be able to give this to first responders. Of course, we're talking military first responders, but everybody. We're not specifically just narrowing it to just first responders and military, but anybody. Of course, we focus on our military first responders because of what they have to endure, what they go through. But anybody, I just want people to understand that when you pick this book up, like Mike said, it's kind of like a guidebook. And what works for me, it might not work for you, but at least it gives you a direction into where to go. So I think the biggest thing for me, and it's something my dad always told me, is being macho is what you have to do when you have to do it. When it comes to mental struggles, I think it's very important that people realize that for your well-being, for the well-being of those that you love, you have to seek out a healthy alternative to just dealing with darkness. And Michael's at the end of all the chapters, like he says, we're not forcing you to interact, but I suggest that, hey, read over the questions. Maybe it will give you some insight, especially if you're a person who just doesn't want to talk to someone. So we're really reaching out to all of you out there who are struggling. And I always tell people always say to me, Will, I can't think of anything worse than the World Trade Center falling down on you and your Sergeant John McLaughlin. And I said, you know what? The way I look at it is we all have our own World Trade Centers. It could be that you lost a loved one, you got COVID, you got cancer, were in a bad car accident, you saw combat, or I bring it down to the level where I talk to children. It could be just a giant exam that you think you can't get over. We all have our own World Trade Centers. And something I learned from Michael is, remember this, tragedy is not competitive. So don't always think like, well, okay, this guy had 220 stories in him. My problems aren't as bad as his. Yes, they are, because you value your life is important. And what's going on in your life is important. And so don't compare yourself to other people's tragedies. Don't say, well, this combat veteran got shot and, I got hit by a car. His is worse. No, in that moment in your life, I tell people that's your World Trade Center. It's what we do with ourselves to overcome that. And this book is allowing you at each end of each chapter to actually do something, especially those of you who aren't seeking help. If you are dealing with some type of darkness, we're trying to reach out and help you.
Will, in retelling your story of what happened at the events of 9/11, that was a really gripping story. But the meat of the book is what you and Michael are talking about here, is that part of if you were in a movie, this would be the part where you get rescued and then it segues to black, and then it shows you 10 years later playing happily with your family. You're in that black area right now of okay, all these ups and downs that you struggled with. You went to more than one therapist. You didn't give up. So how did you make it through those ups and downs?
Well, first and foremost, the meats and potatoes are, of course, the event of 9/11 and what happened to our team, which I detail in here because it's important. I want to honor those that we lost that day. But I guess it's all the support I've gotten from my wife, my family, and I know not everybody has a great family life. I was very fortunate to have that. But even with having that, it was tough. I think for me, it was my love for my family and knowing that I didn't want the terrorists to touch another generation, and I share in the book what really triggered me to actually seek help was an evening that I was suffering from my mental struggles. And mine has always been anger. I would get angry about things. I was angry about what happened on September 11th. I was angry to watch my teammates lose their lives as they heroically tried to save people. I was mad at my physical condition and how I felt helpless. And I would just blow up at different things. I mean, the silliest things. And usually it was like I couldn't find a remote. But one evening, my wife, who was 7 months pregnant, had our beautiful little girl Olivia on my birthday, November 26, 2001. It was sometime the following year. The baby's home. My other beautiful daughter Bianca, she's maybe 5 years old, and it was an evening we were home, and we were blessed to be together. But I was getting upset about something, and I got really angry. And Allison stood up for herself, and kind of stood up to me, and I realized I blew up, and I actually picked up a shoe, and I was gonna throw it at her head. And as I leaned back to throw it at her, I caught myself like, "Whoa, Will, this is not who you are. This is not who you brought up to be." And I remember just dropping the shoe, and I was so embarrassed. got in my truck. I went up to the country and I just sat there and I thought. And that's where I thought about what my father said, macho is doing what you have to do, even though you don't want to do it. And I remember at that point, I thought about it and I thought about how people are influenced by their parents in a great way. And you have people who are alcoholics or drug abusers or physically abused people. Those children that are the children to these people sometimes grow up to be those individuals. They, an abuser of some sort or drug addict. And I felt like I didn't want the terrorists through me, if I'm not a good father, a good husband, to touch another generation of American human beings. So I went home and I went upstairs and I went into my daughter's room, my oldest daughter's room, and I said, Bianca's daddy yellow on. She goes, yeah, daddy, you scare me sometimes. And I said, I got to do something. I love my family too much to let these, I call them the cowards, the terrorists, to touch and affect another generation. So at that point, I started making the effort. And it was a long, long road. I want everybody to understand this, that this didn't happen overnight. This took years and different people that I had to talk to. And I'd always go to the sessions and I just didn't feel like I was getting anywhere. I would try one person, try the second person. It wasn't until finally the third person that I sat down with. And even then it took a long time till that person told me, listen, you're going to have to learn one thing is you don't cure this. You got to learn how to live with this. And through her help and the support of my family, and most of all, the support of me, I tell people, you got to love yourself. If you can love yourself, you'll be able to love others. If you're not loving yourself, you're not giving love out. And for me was I wanted to give my love to my family. And it's something, again, I tell people, the day I get rid of my mental struggles with September 11th, and it's normal. I want people to understand that when you go through an event like I went through, or you went through combat, or you went through something very tragic, it is normal to feel certain ways. It's not something you should be ashamed of. It's not something that you should be embarrassed about. We're human beings, we cry the same, we feel the same on a lot of things. So I tell people the day I get rid of this completely is the day they bury me. But up till then, I'm going to learn how to live with it. I'm going to learn how to control it. And I'm going to learn how to make sure that my family's happy and that I'm happy. And that's something that we're really trying to strive for with this book.
Will, you described your response as being anger, but as I was reading the book, it actually steps through several phases. Like you go from being frustrated with your progress to being irritable, to anger, to rage, and then beyond the rage, then feeling shame about, is this really me? And I know, Michael, in your practice, there are people actually entertain ideas of suicide at that point. Is that something that's typical when when you have this traumatic experience?
Yeah, I find it's not that it's necessarily going to be every time, but I do find definitely a heavy percentage in there, because one of the things that I watch is PTSD has the ability, I won't say it'll do it every time, but it has the ability to just keep perpetuating shame and guilt. Because not only do you have the struggle of the event itself, or in many cases with first responder, series of events, but then you start to feel, like Will said, all of a sudden here I'm picking up a shoe going, whoa, I've never raised a hand to a woman in my life. And here I'm about to throw a shoe. And now there's more shame. And so it just keeps perpetuating, because it's like you get on this hamster wheel that you just can't find a way off sometimes, or it feels that way. And so not only do you start to feel helpless to this cycle that you're in, but in some ways it starts to wear you down even more. Not only do you have the initial injury, but it keeps eroding more and more within you, to the point that you start to feel hopeless too. And many times people just get to the point that they just want to escape. And I often ask a couple different ways. The typical question, of course, is, do you want to harm yourself, or do you want to kill yourself? And a lot of times people will say no. And I'll say, but do you want to live? And they'll say no. And that's hard for a lot of people outside to understand that, but it's because they're stuck in this non-life, this kind of in between, more, I get a more of a spiritual term, would become like a purgatory, if you will, where you're stuck between, I don't really want to die, but I can't take this anymore, whatever this is. And then of course, if you have the added piece of feeling shame, again, I'm going to use first responders, but this is not just about first responders. But when you're supposed to be the people who, and again, I'm going to use something silly here, who have it all together, right? Then they feel like, oh, but I can't really speak out. And there's even more that goes with that piece. And so part of what I try to do is even let them know the people that I've seen that have the most courage, the people who are truly strong, are the ones who realize that not having it all together is actually really normal and really healthy, because then you have the opportunity to do something with it. But if you're constantly trying to fight this hamster wheel effect, you just wear out and get exhausted.
Yes, I teach a suicide awareness class to the law enforcement academies with the sheriff's office and down at our community college as well.
Mhm.
And I talk about they feel helpless, hopeless, and they tend to isolate.
Yes.
For the most part, they will isolate oftentimes because they feel remorse about something and don't want to talk about it. And Will, in the book, you talk a lot about survivor guilt or survivor remorse. That why you, well, you change place with somebody as you're pushing the cart. Somebody tries to rescue you, and you're the one that survives. How did that impact the way you thought over the next several years?
It was heavy. It was very heavy for me. I mean, here, you look at the teammates I lost, I wouldn't be alive, first of all, if it wasn't for my Sergeant John McLaughlin. I'm glad he's alive and we have such a great relationship, but his expertise. But then, Antonio Rodriguez switched spots with me just before the tower came down, and it was teamwork. He just said, Will, let's switch spots. You've been pushing the cart from the police desk that, we're pushing the cart with equipment. And he said, let me switch spots with you, because if you're tired when we get to where we have to go, you're no good to us. So I just thought teamwork. And that change of position was led to my survival. Christopher Amoroso, who had been saving people before we got there and then became part of our team, he came back in and he hooked up with us, and he lost his life. And of course, my partner Dominic Pizzulo, who could have went up a hole, instead stayed to try to get me out. And then when the second collapse happened, he passed after a big piece of concrete came and hit him. And in his last moments, he's not even thinking about his life that he's losing. He pulls out his sidearm and fires around above him in the hole to let someone know, hey, we're still down here. So those three deaths are something that lives with me every day. But especially after the attacks, it's something that weighed me down day after day after day. Why am I alive? I'm What's so special about me? These guys are great guys. All were fathers, good Americans, brave Americans. To me, they encompass the word hero. They are the true heroes, um, and I had to struggle with that. And while struggling with that, I had to still try to be a good husband, a good father. And I find that you know it's tough. It's tough, and it's tough to talk to people. First responders I've talked to since, and have told me what I felt was, who do I talk to? Here I am, amongst cops, but I can't talk to my fellow officer about what I'm feeling because that person hasn't gone through it. And sometimes I tell people the best thing you can do is listen to someone. As cops and first responders, military, sometimes we don't understand. We want to put ourselves in that situation instead of just listening. A perfect example I tell people is like, as men, sometimes we say, "Oh, I wonder what it's like to give birth," or how tough is it? We'll never know. And if you haven't been through a tragic event and you have somebody, a person that you love, is trying to maybe talk to you about it, just listen. Because if you interject and say, "Well, I would have done this," or "You should feel this way," without the proper training, you kind of make that person go back into a shell. And that's what I feel is like for me. I didn't want to talk to anybody. Who do I talk to? Who could I talk to that would understand that? My sergeant's the only one, and it's not something I talked to him about. I couldn't talk to my wife about it. I couldn't talk to my fellow officers about, seeing my Dominic Pizzulo pass. or the death of my friends. I just didn't have anybody to talk to, and I felt alone. And that's the main thing I want to really tell people is you're not alone. It's just a matter of seeking people out that are qualified and are willing to listen to you and understand what you're going through I think in a respectful and with open ears that you can feel comfortable with. But for me, I felt alone. I felt really alone.
You mentioned, rightly so, the toughest 3 words for a first responder to say, and I think this may be true for many other professions as well, are "I need help."
Yeah,
What
that's
would you
tough.
want? What message do you want to send to the general public who can't understand why it's so difficult to say "I need help"?
No, I think, of course, today with social media, everybody looks happy on social media, but the reality is we're all human beings. We all suffer things. I think it's important to say I need help because you can't do it by yourself. I'm sorry. On September 11th, we showed up to those towers. I remember here we are wearing our uniforms, our gun belts. You think you're Superman, and I'm standing in front of these towers, and I felt this big. You realize we're just human beings, and what makes us stronger, like what made us stronger on September 11th, wasn't the individual. It was the community. It was people coming together, and you realize that you're going to need help and there's nothing wrong with saying I need help. I think we've made a society where you almost shun someone that says I need help. But actually, the people who are the strongest, I feel, are the people who can come out and say, I do need help, because those people are going to get better in whatever they're looking for, whether it's a mental struggle, a mental illness, whether it's just performance at the workplace. Someone that steps out and said, look, I don't understand what's going on. I want to learn. I want to be able to be healthier. But it's tough. It's hard to come out of that shell, out of sometimes being ashamed to ask for help. It's tough, but what I can tell people is the moment that you really push yourself out to say, "Hey, I do need help," you start working your way toward, as we say, the sunrise. You start working your way toward happiness. And one thing I tell everybody is that I have learned over the years as a survivor is that you deserve happiness. We're not on this earth that long. I always tell people, especially kids, is there's 365 days in a year. If you're lucky to live till 90, part of that time when we're born, we're in diapers. If you make till 90, you might be in diapers again. You do the math. We don't have that much time on this earth. So be brave. Be someone that says, you know what, I need help. And I know if I can get that help, I'm going to be stronger. I'm going to be able to be happier. And that's something that's contagious to those around you, because by you getting help, by you getting stronger, you're one day, and I know this as a fact, are going to be able to help other people. And I think that's the important thing on making this world a better place and helping those people that are going through mental struggles is being able to share our experiences that we've been through that are tough, and other persons to say, you know what, I'm in the same place you were, but I didn't know where to go. So saying I need help helps you and helps many other people.
Yeah, I think Jim, it's also, especially when I think of first responders, I think it's second nature to call in for assistance, or a fire's too big, and so you call in extra units to come in and start, and you don't think anything of that. There's no shame in that whatsoever, because it's a very functional part of the job, and we all know what the enemy, if you will, is. There's a burglar, there's a murderer, there's a fire, there's something that we are going to fight against. But in this case, we can't see it, and it's all within us. And so there's this almost piece of, wait a minute, what am I calling this help in for? There's nothing here, but yet there is. And I think sometimes that even plays in the psyche of, well, I can't call unless there's an actual threat, because it's misperceived. It really is a threat. It just happens to be this kind of abstract internal fight that's going on.
Oftentimes in working with first responders and people in general who've been victims of some sort of trauma, it comes down to some of the simplest things in therapy that people forget how to do. One of those things is how to breathe,
Yes.
or how to enjoy life. And Will, you mentioned that having a hobby was so important to your recovery process. And in your case, your hobby was hunting. And it's not just the act of hunting, but the act of being out in nature and just being able to observe things. Um, but you give tips also to other people just to get themselves up off the couch. Uh, can you explain again, you or Michael, how vital that is to the recovery process?
I think it's immense. I mean, I get that question all the time. People say, you went through such a tragedy where there was so much death. How can you bow hunt again? It's not about the killing part. For me, it was being able to get out there, what I used to do before 9/11, and watch the sunrise, watch nature come to life, be out there, the smell, the sound of nature. I cannot express how that much meant to me. And, you always know that after a struggle, you appreciate things. I think I appreciated the outdoors even more after the attacks of September 11 because I got a second lease on life. But I think it's important that people understand that like you said, it's those small things. For me, breathing is important. If I find myself getting agitated or starting to get angry, my wife will cue me like, "Hey, you're getting yourself worked up. I need to take a walk. I need to breathe. I need to be able to control myself." But I think it's important that people push themselves to experience the good things in life because the things that are weighing us, the bad things that are weighing us down, can bring us down really easy. But if you can find whatever that your passion is, whatever your obsession is out there, whether it be for me, it's the outdoors, whether it be reading, whether it be just hanging out with your kids, going to the park, taking walks. It's important that if you're struggling with any type of mental struggle, any darkness, that you push yourself to find those moments where you can feel happy. I think when you feel happy, it gives you more energy and more strength to move forward.
And for me, I think there's two. One, when Will speaks about hunting, of course, I have a strong bias toward that as well in nature. Uh, for me, I just sitting and watching nature, observing, interacting, smelling a pine tree and noticing the different fragrances between one pine tree and another may sound silly, but it's such a huge container that is non-judgmental and can hold all of your questions, all of your emotions, can teach you so many things about life when you just really engage in it in that way. It's peaceful. But then also secondarily, when I go to the movement piece, of course, our book is not meant to be like an exhaustive treatment manual or an academic explanation of trauma. So, because of how complex it is. But even with the movement, again, often our trauma experiences are ones of helplessness, where we, like for instance, Will was pinned. Beyond basically being able to move one arm and just a partial of another, there wasn't much he could do in that aspect. And I think that feeling of helplessness really affects our psyche. So even the ability to move can help us with our somatic kind of disconnect or our body disconnect. Which of course with research we're finding, just the significance in that. I think of even walking. Not only does it physically help us burn some of that anxiety and frustration and anger and the struggles that we have, but walking is kind of a natural EMDR, which is that eye movement desensitization reprocessing technique, but it's activates more parts of the brain. So even if you're thinking, and you're not necessarily talking, but you're also observing and bringing in colors and smells, by default, you're activating more parts of your brain and bringing the mind-body connection back together. So there's a lot of components that go on with that from a true psychological perspective that just from just an experiential part, it just feels better. It feels more natural. It feels more like you're in power again of your own life instead of that helpless feeling.
Yes, Francine Shapiro, who developed EMDR, she even talks about she developed it while she was walking through the park and just thinking about things, and she noticed that her eyes were moving. In the activities in the back of the book, you mentioned about being mindful movement or mindful walking,
Yes.
not just going for a walk. And when we're working with first responders over here, we give them an exercise of being mindful of their senses, like when you're outside, notice 5 things that you see, 4 things that you smell, 3 things that you hear, 2 things that you could taste, one thing that you feel, just to get them into that rhythm of seeing what's going on in their body at any given time.
Yes. Yeah.
So, you know, Will, throughout the book, you make it a point to say you are not a hero, that there are lots of other people that were involved in this. Uh, in her book, What Makes a Hero, Elizabeth Svoboda, who comes from Stanford, does things out of altruism or true selflessness. They don't do it for any type of reward. And I think that's the way you see all of your fellow first responders as well. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that all those that died that day, all those that just, and not only the first responders, like I tell people, and you read about it in the book that on that day there was so many heroes. They were wearing uniforms, they weren't wearing uniforms, just human beings, have that in them to be heroes. And I think those people that we lost are true heroes. Me, I was just doing my job, and I'm one of the fortunate ones that made it home that day.
Yeah, and same things. I'm kind of funny about the word hero because it gets thrown around a lot. If I had to come up with anything, I think it's those who are courageous enough to maybe still walk forward or even stand resolute while being terrified. That they march ahead in spite of their fear, and so when you think of compassion. When you think of those kind of words, like the lady you just mentioned that wrote the book, I think it takes that anyway, because to be vulnerable takes courage, takes fear. You have to let down your defenses. So in any of those forms where you are willing to be courageous enough to take a risk for another, yeah, or for yourself, for that matter.
Yes, I mean this goes to a point of other authors who say that it's important to expose your own vulnerabilities, to say, yes, I'm vulnerable here, in order to be successful, rather than just trying to hold it all inside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and is there a question with that, Jim?
Carson, which is a military installation. What's that?
Oh, was there a question there? I might have missed something. It cut out on me.
No, it was more of a comment there, more so than a question. But I just wanted to ask Will, whether you use hero or other words like warrior. Every day I go to Fort Carson to work with military members and their families there, and there's these signs that recount the warrior's ethos. I will always place the mission first. I will never accept defeat. I will never quit. I will never leave a fallen comrade. Whether you consider yourself a hero, a warrior, are those things important in recovery? Not to admit defeat, not to quit.
Oh, absolutely. I feel I'm a warrior. I think growing up, I always wanted to be that cop. I served my nation in the U.S. Navy. I think there's so many warriors out there, but there's a warrior within each and every one of us, and it doesn't have to, again, be the extreme of a traumatic event. It's just life. You have to be a warrior. You have to move forward. You have to fight. You have to claw. You have to go toward your dreams. And like I said, a warrior, I think, is in all of us. And you have to find that warrior, especially when you're in a dark place. You have to remember that it's within you. I mean, there was a point then, and you'll read about it in the book, where I wanted to die on September 11th. We had been crushed, lost 3 teammates, had been burnt. We had a weapon go off in there, and I was physically, and mentally drained. And there was a part in there you'll read that I almost gave up. And through my faith, I don't preach religion, but my faith, I had enough in me to continue to fight. And I realized that when you think you can't anymore, yes, you can. You just have to dig down deep. I tell people 3 words: faith, hope, and love. And again, I don't preach religion. If you have faith in a religion, believe in your religion. If you don't have faith, you're an atheist, then believe in yourself. You got to have hope, and you have to have love. And those are 3 things I think make us all warriors. So if you find yourself in a dark place, or you're back to the wall, understand that if you dig down deep within yourself, that warrior you is going to come out, and you're going to be able to, start to overcome the obstacles ahead of you. And again, I was pretty much near death, and I found a way to survive. And again, I am no different than anybody else who's listening to us tonight. I'm a human being. I bleed the same as you. I feel pain the same as you. But I fought really hard. And if that makes me a warrior, I'll take that. But I guarantee that each and every one of you who are listening to us today, who are going to read this book, there's a warrior within you. You just have to find him. And I promise you, when you fight hard enough, that warrior will come out within you, whether it be something physical or something mental.
So, Michael, you describe people to use a Jimeno approach from your Chinese studies.
Yes.
To face the darkness with eyes wide open. Can you expand upon that?
Yeah, a lot of times, especially with grief, loss, traumatic events, we focus so much on the loss of what we want back, quite honestly. And I think of the eyes wide open as looking at things for exactly what it is. Not just what we want it to be, what it could have been, what it should have been, but here it is now. What do I do with this? And it's kind of a Viktor Frankl-esque. It's also the Chinese philosophy. But it's finding a way. Well, I keep having the word acceptance pop in my head, which I think is often misconstrued, which can actually get in the way of healing if we don't process it. So I'll spend sometimes a session or two just on the word acceptance. And that to me is what that eyes wide open is. You looking at it for everything that it is, whether you like it, you don't have to like it, you don't have to approve of it, you don't have to want it or anything else. But that eyes wide open is, but here it is. As much as I don't like it, as ugly as it is, this is what's happened. This is where I'm at. Maybe this is how I'm behaving at the moment. And if I want to get to there, I'm going to have to walk through this. I cannot find my way around it. I cannot game it. So I'm going to have to turn and stare at it and then walk into it, which again, if we go sunrise through the darkness, that was also motivated by a book called A Grace Disguised, Jerry Sitzer, that he said it was only when I first took my first steps into the darkness did I walk toward the sunrise. And that's what it is, because if you even think of the symbolic of turning into the darkness, pain, the misery, shame, guilt, your own frustrations, to turn into that, if that is your darkness, you better have your eyes wide open or you're going to be tripping over things. And so there's a story in there, even with a client that I had, that we really investigated her life, quite a long history in her life of suicidal thoughts daily, but we used it in the analogy of the cave, and the darkness was the further she would go back. Although it felt like it provided her more safety, it actually was starving her. And so part of it was, let's go in there, let's go explore, let's get our eyes wide open in this darkness and look around. Let's see not just what you feel you're getting from it, but truly, let's look at the whole picture. And I think sometimes even with this here, that's what the eyes wide open is facing your fears instead of running from it, or trying, not necessarily run, but trying to avoid it, because that gets you back on the hamster wheel again.
Thank you. Some folks have put forth this idea that PTSD, and I know first responders don't like the D in there. They'll go to PTSR, post-traumatic response, or just PTS, post-traumatic stress. I don't use that term at all in my practice, because I said there's nothing post about the trauma. The trauma is always ongoing. But they describe PTSD as being a wounding of the soul. How would each of you respond to that?
I'll let Mike go first on that one.
You bet. The wounding of the soul, I think there's two parts. One, I think, well, I guess they'll both end up kind of funneling into what we call a moral injury, where it's when we have kind of a belief in whether it's what life should be, how people should be, or even maybe how authority should be, and something happens to that really breaks that belief system. For instance, with 9/11, we know that not everyone gets along. We know that we have national battles, we have war, we have things like that. But the idea that someone could ever fly planes into buildings where there's just innocent people and just take that many people out in one shot, not aim at military installations, which would at least make sense, may not be okay, but at least would make sense. Or I think of Will, I think of, the first time he cried that night was when he, not in all the pain, not in all the death, not in all of that, but when he was first pulled out of the hole, he had no idea the buildings were gone. And when he saw that, the immensity of what that did to his soul and the moral injury because of what he and his teammates all were there to do, and realized they couldn't because it was done, it was over. They could not save those people like they wanted to. That's that wounding of the soul. It's not, I don't want to say just, I don't want to minimize. It's not just a torn up leg or a head injury or those sort of things, which are bad enough all by themselves. It's something that that you stand on in your life. So it's something that gives you a foundational security, I guess, and it gets broken.
Yeah, to Mike's point, I think again, that's why I brought Mike in on this book, because those are answers that are tough for me. I just felt broken. I felt broken as a human being. I felt broken as a cop. I felt like we failed that night. I think that was the main thing for me, that, there was so much injury, so much loss, that it really took an impact on me internally that I didn't even realize I was having. I think that was part of my going toward my sunrise, is being able to rebuild myself, to be able to heal those wounds that I didn't realize how bad they were internally. So when you say the wounding of the soul, I think that in conjunction with the physical injuries, the mental part was so immense that, and I don't think we're prepared for it. Again, we become first responders, people, military. We want to go help people. We want to serve our country, but we're not mentally equipped to see some of the things we do, but we do them because that's who we are. We're people that want to help other people. And it's tough because then you're confronted with these things, like there's a saying, I wish my eyes can unsee what they saw. And we have to now struggle with that. And again, I know that I'm specifically talking about the military and the police departments. They do have outlets for you to talk to people, but it's hard to go talk to those people. Again, the shame, the amount of loss that you see, or the amount of injuries you see, it makes it difficult. But I think it breaks your soul. It breaks you as a human being when we have to go through such tragedies or deal with any type of really heavy struggles. But again, I'm just telling everybody out there that there is a way to come back from this, and educating yourself by being able to talk to people is a big way of that, because we don't have all the answers. I didn't have the answers. My wife didn't have the answers. She knew there was something wrong with me, and I didn't even notice that. So it's a long road, but that road to be able to healing your soul is out there. You just have to seek it out.
Just want to check. Okay, so a last question here. We're approaching the 20th anniversary of 9/11 events. There are young people in college today, your youngest daughter, Will, who weren't born then. We had Olympic athletes who weren't born then, whose only knowledge of what happened that day is what they see on social media, reading history books, maybe and seeing movies, or on news channels. How do you hope they relate to your story?
Well, that's a great point, and I think that's why one of the main key components to this book, our book, is to educate people in the beginning part of the book of the heroism of that day. You know, I always say that out of a tragedy, if there's no light found in it, then it's just a tragedy. I and Mike refuse to allow September 11th to be just a tragedy. I want it to be something that inspires people and helps people. My daughter grew up learning about it through the years. You know, like you say, Olympic athlete. You know, my daughter goes to Auburn University, where we just have Suni Lee, who just won the Olympic gold medal attending Auburn, and she wasn't even born when the attacks happened. I think it's our responsibility to teach these children, just like I was taught as a young child about Pearl Harbor. And it's very important that we teach future generations of the tough times we as Americans, as human beings, have gone through, because we're able to take the good out of those tragedies and be able to help future generations. This book is a book that I know will help this generation and future generations as they read it to say, hey, these people, this guy, his family, his team went through a very ugly, dark time. And this guy probably shouldn't be here even afterwards. I talk about that moment, like Mike says, where I want to end things. You know, it's not that you want to commit suicide. You just want the pain and the loneliness and the struggle to go away. But I'm here today. And through September 11th, we need to teach this generation of American and human beings that, unfortunately, mankind could be evil to each other, but there's always good. And I always talk about that quote by Edmund Burke. You know, all that is needed for the triumph of evil is to good men to stand by and do nothing. And I'm here to tell people, especially this future generation, there will always be good men and women that step up when evil's there, and we will conquer evil. And I want people to, again, remember, you're not alone. You can conquer evil, but it takes a village, and it takes good men and women. And on September 11th, there was good men and women, and today there's good men and women who are willing to step up, not only on an event, but also help you through any struggle you have. All you need to do is step out there and say, I need help.
And for me, one of the things that I was really taken with, of course, once the kind of the shock and awe of September 11th was done, was the stories that I heard. And of course, even talking with Will while he's down in the buildings and seeing some of the people, it didn't matter what age you were, what race you were, if you were an immigrant, if you were an American, it didn't matter if you were a visitor, none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was there was a lot of humans helping humans. You know, we have so many hot topics of argument today, and we seem geared toward the fight of our opinions. And whether, you know, so I'll just go back to 9/11. So yes, the initial part was we had an enemy fly into us, but in the middle of all of that, we had humans of all race, age, gender, sexual orientation. It didn't, again, none of that mattered. Different religions running out of the building. The same was true for the ones running into the building. And everyone was trying to work together to help one another at that base level of humanity. And I think my mind keeps going to one particular story of Will. It was during his recovery. And I think about, there was, again, the effects of PTSD, how it had initially changed at least his reaction. He would take ownership afterwards and go, oh, wait a minute, who am I? What am I doing here? I don't like this. And he would take responsibility for that and make that change. But there was, Will himself was an immigrant. He's also a police officer. Two hot topics today. Again, serve is his mission in life. And I think about, after all this happened, he was going to pick up his daughter at school, and a lady, an Arab lady, as he was starting to pull in, this Arab lady was pushing a stroller, started to walk, and it was just a timing issue. But of course, Will's initial reaction, which was not about a thought, it was just a reaction, as anger and rage of how dare you. And even in that moment, there was that split second, wait a minute, what am I doing again? This is never who I've been. This is just a mom. This is a mom put, this is another person in my community who I have nothing against. And even in that moment, as he's battling through his PTSD, he's exemplifying the very message that was shown on 9/11. Is at a base level, we're all humans just trying to figure this out, and we got to treat each other with respect instead of looking for our differences to put our flags on, I guess. And that's the thing that sticks out for me, was how much beauty was within the ashes and the smoke that day and after. And that's what I hope our younger generations can learn from this, was to remember, while you may be mad and maybe even absolutely furious with things, don't forget it's a human being that you're pointing that at. If I could get anything through from that, it would be that, is see the human first. You can still be mad, but see the human first.
We are at the end of our time, and unfortunately, because I would love to carry on this conversation for another hour if we could, or longer. But working with the military and first responders as I do, I hear this line, and I don't want it to become a throwaway line, particularly with the military, of thank you for your service. But I don't hear this given to first responders. And Will, I want to thank you for your service, and Michael, for your service as well, because people like you who work to treat individuals who have experienced all types of trauma are also exposing themselves to that vicarious trauma. And I want to thank your wife for her service, Will, because I don't think people really appreciate what the families of law enforcement officers go through, of other first responders, and how it takes a toll on their family day after day after day after day.
And Jim,
Well,
can I make a comment about Allison real quick? Okay.
Sure.
I'm really glad you brought her up, and because Allison is not someone who wants to be seen, but she's a doer. So she's a behind the scenes kind of person who will just handle things. And so she ended up doing a lot more work than she ever signed on for, by just trying to keep me and Will on track, I think. But also the fact that, when we talked about showing courage in spite of your fears, she had no desire to have any limelight in this book. But she did it anyway, because I kept telling her, I said, Allison, even though this chapter is about you, it's not about you. It's about the people that you're going to be able to reach out to. It's about the people who don't get heard. You might be able to speak to them in a way through what you experience. And for that, I was really grateful, because I know she was absolutely uncomfortable, and she did it anyway, because she also wanted to serve. And so I'm really glad you brought her up, because I wanted to highlight that point.
Alrighty. So as we wrap up, I wanted to let folks know where they can get the book. They can get it off the University Professors Press website. And if you order it before September 11th, you get a 10% discount with, okay, I'm going to have to read a coupon code here. STTDNR _ 1898. It's in the comments section on our Facebook page. So William and Michael, it's been my honor to meet with you today, and I want to wish you both best wishes and success on this book. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.